Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we will be reading from Pro Revenge. Our first post is by Rabin Graves, micromanager forced to step down after mismanaging a new retail service. Relevant background info first. Anyway, several years ago, I was working at one of the big hardware stores in my area. It's a household name and had some upward mobility with decent pay for the area. I never really found a niche there after my first year and a half. I learned quickly though, so they kinda made me a Swiss Army employee. I could work hardware, plumbing, mix paint, make keys, prepare contracts for installs, and knew all the features and flaws of the appliance models we sold. I was happy to do this because I was building a reputation as someone who could do everything. 2 years in, a new program was implemented that I was uniquely qualified to assist with. They created a new position for me. It was marketed as an all-in-one renovation remodel service for interiors. I was to assist the designer with product selection, product information, contracts, and local marketing for this service. Everyone involved was super excited about it. Note, I was still only making $10 an hour in 2015 for this. The problem was that because this was brand new, no one knew how it should work. The designer basically had to figure it out for herself while I tried to catch her up with all of the store and product knowledge I had accumulated during my unique experience with the company. Issues with the program. It was way too expensive. Product to be used had to come from one of our stores, which was limiting. No one knew about it. It was a rocky start. Coworkers would call me over to talk to customers if they mentioned working on a big project, but that's all we had. No completed jobs to reference or anything provided by corporate to get us running. We made our own stuff. I put together a video advertising the service and got the nod from management to use company card to purchase a TV and media player to roll the video on repeat. We built vignettes in the store to showcase our design ability. I had been picking up a lot from the designer, so it ended up being a partnership in effect. The micromanager. Enter Devin, the assistant manager. He had actually been involved in the project from the beginning and had been pretty supportive and brought good energy at first. But I think he got fed up with issues that we couldn't control. Sloppy contractors refusing to fix things that they messed up, slow design process as customers worked out what they wanted, and people just backing out after taking a bunch of our time when they see the price. We were, on average, charging $3,000 more for a small bathroom remodel on labor alone. Consulting and design fees were also worked into the final cost. The product was discounted to basically being tax-free, but as I mentioned, options were limited to products the company sold. It was just too expensive to make many sales on the poorer side of town, where almost everyone knows some kind of contractor or tradesman with connections. It wasn't a good market for this program, but we did manage to start hitting and exceeding our numbers. Number 7 in the region for the brand new program was not bad. And just when we finally started getting some business and a rhythm around 8 months in, Devin decided that it was not working fast enough for him. Obviously the designer was to blame, since he had no authority over the contractors or setting prices. She didn't know what she was doing and he was going to make some changes. He honestly didn't do much besides hover, bring bad energy, and make terrible suggestions. He didn't understand the scope of what we had to do to get a customer out the door and happy. He forced us to cut corners and get the sale as quickly as possible without concern for liability, for basically destroying a room in someone's home to remake it, or what was realistic in terms of timelines. Customers felt rushed and got nervous. They backed out. We came to a standstill. We would only have 2 or 3 designs in progress at a time, but suddenly after working our butts off building the program, we had no customers for the first time in 6 months. Obviously Devin was not subjecting us to his authority hard enough, so he went harder and fired the designer. I lost my patience. I'm a chill dude, but I had been working my butt off for this company, making peanuts on the promise that I was working towards something. I endured working for the incompetent managers that got their positions because they started working there at 18 and made it their life. The toxic alpha male, I will lead, you will follow BS was too much, so I started bullying him back, making fun of him in a teasing way where he couldn't really react without looking bad or losing control. I did that for a while, and he left me alone to run the program in the interim, since I was the only option. The designer and I had become friends though, so I was still mad about how it went down. I wasn't finished yet, but I didn't know what to do. Eventually, they got another designer, and Devin had me moved back to what I had been doing before. Passed over for several promotions that I was more than qualified for. The market had been flooded with long-time employees that were being moved around. Bad luck, but I was done with the place. One day we were sent an email link to an anonymous manager review survey. The store computers were set up with an always-on and logged-in user profile, so I wrote down the link and verified with a coworker that they weren't unique. In every department I visited that day, I wrote a review for Devin. All different ratings, some good, some bad, but I made the good ones so that they sounded bad, but as if I didn't know it was bad. I did that maybe 10 times. It wasn't character assassination or anything, just opinion-based stuff with some vague examples, so no one could figure out it was me. I didn't lie either, I just said what people don't usually say out loud. He would barely look at anyone after that. A couple of weeks later he resigned his position as assistant manager and took an exterior design position at the other end of the store, as far away from the departments he had been over before. Basically the same thing as what we had done with interiors, but he was in the designer's shoes. I left a couple of months later to work tech support for DHS, but while I was still in training for that, my friends from the store told me he had gotten fired. Maybe he learned something. He should at least have learned how my designer friend felt. They were both fired at Christmas. Next up, posted by Traveling ABC, former manager made my life hell, and I finally got her fired. I was desperate to join a new job after my husband and I were both laid off last year. When I was offered a new role, I knew it would be a step down from what I was doing, but the manager and the team seemed great, and that part has not changed. However, since my manager Gary was so busy, he basically offloaded me to another manager, Jane. I was supposed to be the connection point between my team and Jane, but it quickly became Jane micromanaging me. She would ask me to work through lunch, move, cancel vacation days, call at 11 p.m. on weekends, and order me around on phone calls. She also made nasty comments about my weight and said I was big for my race. The list of personal slights so long that it filled 3 pages. I would talk back to her, and she did not like that, and that provoked her more. I only stayed because we needed to pay the bills. Finally, I had a mental breakdown on a Friday afternoon after she yelled at me for something trivial about scheduling a meeting without including someone from her team who I didn't know about. I was dealing with a family tragedy and couldn't take it anymore. I told Gary about the situation with Jane, and he was sympathetic and not at all surprised, considering half her team quit. He immediately offered to move me to a different team under him. I was thrilled. Well, turns out going to the new team didn't help. Jane continued to order me around from afar. When I ignored her emails, she came to my desk one day and started loudly talking about how I am not qualified for this role. Gary overheard and finally told her off, but the verbal abuse did not stop. After 2 months there, I abruptly wrote my resignation letter and stapled the list of Jane's offensive comments and CC'd everyone. Gary offered a bunch of accommodations to try to keep me, but seeing how she was still provoking from afar, I said the only way for me to stay would be for her to go, and he did not have authority to let her go. Her manager was in a different country, and despite several HR complaints from at least 5 people, nothing was done. So I left, loudly and without shame, telling everyone exactly why I was leaving. Times were very bad for 3 months. There were nights we would eat slices of bread just so we could pay the mortgage and emergency expenses from a health crisis and a funeral. Even after he found a job, we were still catching up on bills and still are. I spent months applying to 5 to 10 roles per day, sometimes over 20. Last month, I saw a public memo about a big shot from a former company joining the company I just left. I used to work with this guy closely and texted him a congrats. Let me know if you need any insights on the new place. We had a quick call where I told him some ins and outs, where I thought they could innovate. After this call, he asked me to join the team as his chief of staff. I accepted. Imagine Jane's shock when we had our first all-hands call. All the VPs and above were asked to welcome the new Big Shot in a giant conference room. In Big Shot's speech, he breezed over that I'll be his chief of staff along with a few key names. I now sat 2 levels above Jane, and apparently, within the 3 months I was not there, the other half of her team turned over. Every single person left. Gary was excited for me and said all nice things. However, Jane took the classless route and sent Big Shot an email about how I'm an unqualified idiot, that I used to work for her, how I tried to get her fired, and that she suspects I lied to get ahead. She didn't even try to be fake nice. Big Shot forwarded me her email and asked what this was about. I was so nervous and excited. Little did Jane know, I was a director at Big Shot's competitor company and was already a level above her, so 2 levels isn't a big leap, and I worked with him for 5 years. I had an hour call with Big Shot and told him she was bad for the company culture and was a nasty person in general, but the evidence he needed was Gary confirming that her whole team has turned over, my prior resignation letter which was still sitting on my desktop when I logged in upon return, and a few other nasty emails she sent her recent staff, which they were happy to share with us. Big Shot fired Jane on Friday. Thank you for listening to the Reddit Chronicles. Follow for more content.